Hello, good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I am Ibrahim Sani.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider the news of the day. Well, let's begin with affordable housing, this perennial problem, Ibrahim. So the Housing and Local Government Minister, Zuraida Kamarudin, has announced today that 11 private developers will be launching some 15 affordable housing projects. Now, this will mean some 46,800 units of affordable homes will be available soon. So good news, because I believe the Pakatan Harapan government has promised to build some 100,000 units of affordable homes, capped at the price of 300,000 ringgit every year that they are in office in Putrajaya.
Okay, so, a few years ago, I remember both of us were talking about this on the radio. A few years ago, I'm
We're
like
still
5 years
talking about it now,
We're
right?
still talking about it right now. Think about it, right? Some statistics have come out because the rates published by the Department of Statistics includes ownership of informal houses. But even so, Malaysia's home ownership rate of 72.5%, meaning more than 2/3 of Malaysians already own home, and this is relatively high, compared against the world.
Anecdotal evidence seems to suggest otherwise. If you're thinking that statistics show that 72% of Malaysians own their own homes, that's wonderful. That's way higher than most developed countries. But is this really the case?
This is apparently not the case based on various factors.
Sure.
Look, before we jump into the details, I just want to ask, is it really that important for you to own a home? Because when you talk about stagnating wages, wages that can't chase or keep up with the inflation rate, you really have to start considering what are the assets that can make money and what are the assets that can't make money.
Well, a house is an investment, right? And like all investments...
So, is it really?
Yeah, it is an investment, but like all investments, it can be a good investment or a bad investment. You can lose money on it or you can make money on it.
Just like a car. People say that, a car is
always a depreciating asset, yeah.
But get this, a car gets you from point A to point B. You go, just don't drive around for the fun of it. You go to work with a car, you actually make money with a car, you freelance with a car, you moonlight with a car, and a car can double up as a Grab. Really, you start to consider
what can make you some money, right?
And pun intended, right? I mean, you start to consider what is a good investment or a bad investment, as per you, what you said. Is a car really a bad investment, a depreciating asset when it can actually make money? And is a house, any type of housing for that matter, is truly an investment in the long run, when nobody seems to be able to sell the house at the right price?
Well, okay, so that depends on the landscape of the property market. And I do have to kind of clarify or go into a little bit of detail with that figure that we gave. 72% of Malaysians who own homes. That sounds very high, but if you delve deeper into the statistics, this is according to the Department of Statistics, this home ownership figure actually includes informal housing, which includes rumah tinggal, includes settlers. So in reality, not that many Malaysians own their own homes. And what's more distressing, according to Bank Negara recently, they announced that houses in Malaysia are considered to be seriously unaffordable by international standards. And this is the way they've calculated this is that a house is deemed affordable if it's priced not more than 3 times of annual household income. So anything that's above that is considered very unaffordable. And that's the case right now.
Have you heard of home sellers? They go to town and they say, I'm waiting for the right time to sell my house.
But who can time the market? Unless you have a crystal ball.
If you have a house and you want to sell it for 900,000 ringgit, let's say 1 million, one round million.
Nice figure.
And there's no one there to buy it, that means you got to lower your housing price. It's simple. That's how the market goes. In the pasar, you want to sell one chicken for $1 billion. Nobody will buy your single chicken for $1 billion. It's just like that.
Okay, and I think this is where a little bit of nuance comes into play, right? The housing market is often very difficult. The idea of supply and demand and the prices will adjust accordingly is in the ideal scenario, right? With all these factors, ideal factors. However, with the housing market, often what comes into play say is that there are property developer lobbies. There are also the idea that somehow the property market is a systemic risk to the entire financial architecture because, when you take housing loans, you take mortgages, what if you default on those loans and those mortgages? You're talking about big companies that are going bust. It could be a problem for the economy as a whole. So all these sensitivities, I believe the government has to take into consideration.
Yeah, but
Having said that, I still think that there should be a solution. I mean, we've been talking about this for years,
I
and
agree.
It's just gotten worse every year.
It has gotten worse unless you're out of the housing market and you have no intention of buying the housing market. Suddenly, voila, you don't have a problem with the housing market. If if you live in a big town in KL, Penang, JB, and if you earn a salary of 3,000 ringgit and your partner earns a salary of 3,000 ringgit, so you have a 6,000 ringgit, disposable income, you start to wonder if 1/3 of that salary of yours, combined income, 2,000 ringgit, can that really afford you another home? If it can't, then get out of the market. Don't be, shopping around for a housing market that you can't afford.
Well, okay, let me give you some numbers, right? So, the government has said that affordable homes should be capped at 300,000 ringgit every year. Now, right now, newly launched houses are at an average price of 417,000 every year. That is significantly above what we consider to be affordable housing.
Yeah, and think about it, right? 417,000, monthly repayment is what, 3-4K? 3,000, 4,000 ringgit. That means if you still use the rule of thumb of 1/3 of your income to be paid for housing, you're supposed to be paying 3,000 ringgit. That means your salary is 9,000 ringgit. Are you really, really that capable to actually service that 3,000 ringgit installment house when that housing is actually priced at 420,000 ringgit?
Ibrahim, 80% of housing loan rejections this year was because the house was priced more than 3 times of the applicant's annual income ratio. So I think these are significant issues that not only the Housing Ministry will have to address, but also with the help of Bank Negara, with all the other economic planning units, will need to look at this as a whole and not just kind of silos.
What's fun about this? 2 years, 5 years from now, we're still going to be talking about the same thing. I'm so sorry. It's so pessimistic
I
of
hope
me.
that this problem will be solved, and make it a little bit easier for first-time home buyers like myself to purchase their own home if it fits within their financial goals. All right, well, let's take a look at other big news of the day. Police have opened a murder investigation on the death of a 7-year-old boy. He was found with bruises at an unregistered TAHFIZ school in Lanchong, Temerloh yesterday. Now, according to National News Agency Bernama, Pahang Chief of Police said that Datuk Ohman Nanyang said that the boy died around 1 p.m. yesterday. He was being treated at a clinic there.
Okay, I want to ask you 2 things, Mel. First question is TAHFIZ schools, are they really schools? Because do they really give out certifications that are being endorsed by both the Ministry of Education as well as other institutions of higher learning? Let's assume that question is, we'll just assume that TAHFIZ schools are
schools because they are teaching students
something. The second
something.
type of question is, do you know that TAHFIZ schools are the most lethal schools in Malaysia?
What do you mean by lethal?
No amount of type of school can record the amount of deaths higher than it is in TAHFIZ schools compared to other types of schools. Do you know that in sekolah asrama penuh or sekolah rendah, sekolah menengah, any type of schooling categories, no other children die more than they do in TAHFIZ schools. Okay. So if you think about it, when you talk about it's safer to fly than it is to drive and so on because of ratios like that, you start to wonder, is it really safe to send your children to TAHFIZ schools based on the statistics that we know of? Okay. Remember, the people that were responsible for the fiery 30-plus students that died 2 years ago, they're still not brought to justice because apparently no one can be found as culpable for that particular, fire. That's just one of the many instances where children die in TAHFIZ schools, resulting in deaths.
Well, okay, so I think, again, a measure of nuance here because, again, there are parents who want this for their children, right? My concern is the unregulation of TAHFIZ schools. So TAHFIZ schools in Malaysia largely outside the purview of the Education Ministry, I believe, because of the religious nature of their curriculum, it falls under the purview of the state religious departments. Now, this is where it becomes dangerous, and to safeguard our children, or the children who go to TAHFIZ schools, I think there needs to be some kind of oversight by the government, some form of regulation by the Ministry of Education. Again, I mean, this incident, this case, this tragedy that has happened, Ibrahim, has brought to light the fact that there needs to be regulatory attention on unregistered TAHFIZ schools operating throughout the country.
Okay, so it's not just about the unregulated TAHFIZ schools. Remember, think about it, right? Because if schools are regulated anyway, for instance, the TAHFIZ school that I went to when I was a child.
You went to a TAHFIZ school?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, I didn't know that about
I went to a TAHFIZ school when I was a child, right? It was regulated. And the hazard for that particular time is that no one died in my school, or the school that I went to. But health hazard was there. There's a lot of diseases that was involved.
So hygiene and all that. So we
we
need regulation. And I'm hoping that with more information coming out, this is hopefully this will be one of the few tragedies that we will encounter with TAHFIZ schools.
Hopefully.
Very quickly after this, we're going to be turning our attention to new regulations in the e-gaming industry in China. Stay tuned to consider this. Hello, welcome back to Consider This. Melisa and Ibrahim here with you. Now let's turn our attention to China, where the Chinese government has announced that it is imposing a curfew on online gaming for minors. Now, gamers under the age of 18 years old will be banned from playing online from between 10 p.m. to 8 a.m.
Sounds very China.
They will also be restricted to 90 minutes of gaming on weekdays and 3 hours on weekends and holidays. Now, not just the time limit there, but there's also spending limits. So 8 to 16-year-olds can spend only up to 200 yuan, that is about 120 ringgit per month on their gaming accounts, and 16 to 18-year-olds can spend slightly more, 235 ringgit or 400 yuan for their spending limit. Now, all this is all part of China's move to curb video game addiction, which officials say is damaging to children's health there. However, how is this going to impact the esports industry, given that China is one of the world's biggest gaming markets? We have on the line to discuss this further Firdaus Hashim, or better known as Master Ramen. Firdaus, thanks so much for joining us today. Now,
thank you for inviting.
What did you make of this news, Firdaus, when you heard about it, especially in light of the 20 million ringgit allocation in budget 2020 to develop the local esports industry? So, what do you think?
It's surprising that China, the one of the biggest gaming and esports industry, is enforcing such rules. There's a pro and con for sure, but I think there's more pro to the case lah. But it's very calm. But it's it will impact on the esport and gaming industry for sure.
Firdaus, there's a lot of harms that was mentioned by the Chinese government, including nearsightedness, including the distraction of studies and so on. How harmful are e-games? I mean, I sound like an uncle, but how harmful are e-games to children?
For me, if you didn't control it at all, it will be very addicted. It will bring all the negativity to the kids. But if with a proper control, it should be good. Okay. Because esport, if such rules will disturb the grassroots development of the esport. When you want to raise a new athlete, for sure it will impact the new athletes coming up in the future. But I think this is more to it's like giving a strong message to all the young kids that they shouldn't forget their studies, something like that.
That's true. I mean, I just want to touch back on that issue of, how unhealthy or how harmful gaming is, because last year the World Health Organization listed gaming addiction, which they called gaming disorder, as a mental health condition. This was the first time that they had acknowledged this. I'm just wondering how prevalent this is. I mean, just in your experience, Firdaus, have you seen gaming addiction, or are you also inflicted with gaming addiction?
I'm working as game is my work, so I don't think it's
it's a
more
professional,
to
it's your
working
career.
our
Yes.
edition. But I have seen some players or some kids that are very addicted to games. They don't go to dinner with family anymore, so they sleep very late at night. So this is not a very good activities for the kids, So this kind of rules enforced, you should be. You shouldn't look at it as a very bad thing, because maybe there's another way. Maybe you those kids that have a talent to become an e-sport athlete. Maybe you make assumption for them if they are recognized as an athlete, because we have a lot of youngsters that below 18 that play on a professional level. So this kind of player, maybe you can make assumptions on them because they are professional players.
Well, I don't mean to focus on the negative, Firdaus, but the idea that the Chinese government feels that they had to step in and regulate this industry means that they I guess acknowledge there is a problem. Now, one of the issues that they mentioned was myopia, or nearsightedness in children. Apparently, a report in 2015 found that 500 million Chinese children suffered from visual impairment, and this is nearly half the population over 5 years old. So I guess a significant case, and they want to kind of take a closer look at what's happening here. Do you think there is a significant correlation between nearsightedness and I guess the impact to damage to the eyesight with the amount of time that one gamer spends playing? I see you two wear glasses, Firdaus.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments on this?
I mean, this is very subjective issue. It's not. But for me, a lot of if you look at the PC or you look at TVs too long, it will affect your eyes for sure. And so you cannot just blame games only. So it's the device itself. So there's some professional team, they have a special spec for their players to reduce the UV whatever from the screen to their eyes on. So if you play the game for like 10 hours, 12 hours per day, for sure it will impact you. If you watch TV 12 hours per day, also it will impact you. So it's not really fair if you just to blame it on the game itself. But if you didn't, if you really didn't control the kids, you allow everything. I mean, they just play all the time. So it for sure will bring a very bad impact to the kids.
Understood. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Firdaus. Now we're going to come back and have more on Consider This. Make sure you stay tuned. Hello, thanks for staying with Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, with me, Ibrahim Sani. Now, here's what we want you to consider tonight. So, Airbnb has just released some findings from their internal data, and it turns out that last year, Airbnb guests spent some 583 million ringgit at restaurants and cafes in Malaysia. So, Airbnb now expects its guests to spend more than 878 million at local restaurants this year. This is great because the Ministry of Tourism has a 100 billion ringgit tourism receipt target for Visit Malaysia 2020.
The big problem here that I see is that how much of this actually comes from foreign tourists coming in compared to domestic tourists. And within that segment, how many of them are coming from Singaporeans and Indonesians, which we know form the bulk of tourism in Malaysia, versus the tourists that come from afar, where we kind of need that cash, the market share that we need to grow the most.
Sure, okay, and that's fair. But what I like about this story in particular, Ibrahim, is because this suggests that, and as we know, that the success of Visit Malaysia 2020 or any kind of tourism target isn't, I guess, just contingent on the government, but also it's a kind of grassroots thing. It is down to all of us, to every person, to make this a success. And with what the data from Airbnb seems to suggest is that if Airbnb hosts recommends their favorite makan place, their favorite mama, you know, where to get the best chicken rice, for instance, this actually increases the tourism spend and makes people, I feel, want to spend more time and more money in Malaysia.
Because we all know that the best form of marketing is through word of mouth.
Recommendations. That's right.
There's some figures coming in from Airbnb. 84% of Airbnb hosts say they recommend restaurants and cafes to guests, and in turn driving more people to visit these kind of places that would have otherwise been missed. And therefore, you start to wonder, should you start to use, as in Tourism Malaysia or businesses start to use just Airbnb, you know, hosts and guests to actually talk about their businesses?
So have you ever been to an Airbnb where the host made a recommendation for you?
I literally just did so 2 weeks ago because I was on a short holiday, and and it was a fish and chips place.
Was it a hole in the wall kind of place?
It was.
Yes, that's the best
because
kind.
I was like, okay, so where is a good place to go? You know, go about and buy stuff and stuff like. You know, the host is like, you know, just around the corner, turn left, turn right, third door on the street. It's great.
Yeah,
and it was great.
And that also got me thinking about what will make a successful Visit Malaysia year, right? And I think one of the things, I mean, not just about the tourist spend, but also the impression, because Visit Malaysia tourists tend to be repeat tourists. So if you can kind of get the retention rate, so a great holiday in 2020 will mean perhaps more holidays in the future. And one of the ways I think to make a good impression, and that's been the case for me personally, is that toilets have to be clean. I mean, I always go back to Japan because the toilets are always clean.
Sorry, Thailand as well. I was at a rest stop, a trucker stop actually, somewhere in Thailand.
Oh, notoriously bad hygiene, but
no, clean toilets.
But
clean toilets all
time.
around.
Okay.
It's just bizarre. It's just crazy, and I keep on talking about it until today. That was like 10 years ago. I still talk about it today, and that was just, you know, like a 10-second kind of interaction with me and that truck stop toilet.
So I guess that's what we want you to consider tonight. What can we do individually and collectively to make Visit Malaysia Year 2020 a success? I think it boils down from each of us and not just a top-down directive. Okay, that's all the time we have for the show for you tonight.
So it's Friday night, so enjoy yourself.
Yes, we will be back with you on Monday for another episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris with Ibrahim Sani.
There you go.
Signing off for tonight. Thank you for watching.